The journey begins at the narrow gate. The journey, Jesus beckons me to roam. The journey, where the path is straight. The journey takes me home. The journey takes me home.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to The Journey. It's good for me to be back too. I was on hiatus for a little bit there. And today's guest we have is from the Hood Canal Food Bank, which, as you know, we support. She is the executive director, and her name is Laura Hendricks. So welcome.
Thank you.
So today we'd love to hear about your story and how God has worked his way through it. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
My mom and dad were in high school together, and when Mama was 16, they ended up getting married. Daddy was 17, and 8 months later, my first sister came along.
Wow.
And then in 43, my second sister come along. 44, my brother was born. And then my father had joined the Navy and had a half-hour train stop before he headed for overseas. And Mama came and met him. And lo and behold, I was conceived. And this is when the trouble began. Because my dad, when Mama found out she was pregnant, contacted my dad. And Dad would not believe I was his child. And his mom was writing letters saying that Mama was running out on him. Well, you know, back then, the milkman was always blamed.
Right.
And so I was supposedly a milkman's daughter.
Wow.
And then I ended up redheaded, which made it even worse because there hadn't been any redheaded kids in our family for a while. And if he had been home, he probably would have had me aborted because he did not want any more kids. And so he was gone for about almost 2 years after that before he even came home. And he wouldn't have a thing to do with me. He would still not believe I was his child.
Oh my goodness.
And of course Mama didn't have no time for me because she was so busy with all the kids, getting the older kids in school and stuff like that. And so I was just sort of left on a back burner. And so they stayed around for about a year after Daddy got home from overseas, and then he decided he wanted to go to Alaska. He figured he could get rich.
So where were they at that time before they were?
They were in Seattle.
Oh, Seattle. Okay.
And Daddy, I don't even know what he was doing, you know, after he came back. But anyway, he took off and went to Alaska and left Mom with the 4 kids.
Wow.
And a little bit later, he had gone to Ketchikan, and then he ended up going over to Craig, which is on the Prince of Wales Island, which is the biggest island in southeast Alaska.
Oh, okay.
And he called Mom and told her to let's get the kids ready and come on up all by herself.
Wow.
With 4 kids. So we end up boarding a big cruise ship, which it was the Prince George on its maiden voyage to Alaska.
Oh.
And so we took off, and it took us to Ketchikan, which is your first city you go into when you go into southeast Alaska.
Oh.
And from there, we flew on a little airplane over to Ketchikan, or over to Craig, I mean.
Yeah.
And we lived there for about 6.5 years.
Oh, okay.
And the same year that we got up there, a young pastor and his wife had just graduated out of Bible school and wanted to come win the people in Alaska to the Lord. And he ended up fishing that season on this same boat that my dad was on. And they were known as the roughest crew in southeast Alaska, so they gave him a hard time. Well, he stuck around for that summer, And then he left. Well, he had started a little Sunday school, and the kids remember it, but I was so young, I don't remember going, but we went to his Sunday school evidently, and the seed was planted evidently in my heart during that time.
Yeah.
And so he left, and we didn't have any Sunday school or anything after that.
Oh.
And my folks, you know, they weren't Christians, so they didn't want nothing to do with the Lord. And we were there. Daddy just did odd and end jobs. He was known as the jack of all trades and master of none. He changed jobs all the time.
Wow.
And so in I'll go back a little bit. When I was about 3, I began having these seizures, and I didn't know what was happening to me. And I was a little girl and didn't know what to do. And so when we went to Edna Bay in '54, which was on the same island, it was a logging camp, and a pulp mill had opened up in Ketchikan. And so we started, we packed up and went over there. And by this time I was 9, and I was having these seizures quite often. And at this time, I started being abused by my father and other men that were in the house.
Wow.
And
you hadn't mentioned the seizures to anyone still at this point? Nobody
No.
really, your family was not aware, they weren't
no,
really paying attention?
no.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
what I would do when I would have these seizures is I would pray and ask the Lord to forgive me for being such a naughty little girl. Because I was blamed for everything that went on. And because I cried real easy. I had such a tender little heart that I got blamed for everything that went on with my brothers and sisters. And I was teased a lot because I was redheaded. My nickname was Pinky. And so that made a good way of making poems and making fun of me.
Yeah.
And so I was just taking and just growing more and more into myself. And especially after I started being abused by these people.
Yeah. And nobody there to protect you?
No, because I didn't figure anybody cared, so why tell anybody?
Right.
And while we were there in Edna Bay, somebody started a little Sunday school. And so I would get up by myself. The other kids wanted to sleep in. They didn't want to go. So I'd get up all by myself and go to Sunday school. And it was so neat hearing the Bible stories. But I was never introduced to Jesus as my Savior during this time.
Oh, okay.
It was just telling little Bible stories,
Sure,
you know.
sure.
But my heart was so tender. It was so sweet. And so that got me started really wanting to go to church and go to Sunday school.
And probably God knew exactly what you needed at that time. That's what you needed to hear was these stories. And
Yeah,
to
to
sort of
just
draw
keep
you
that
in.
tenderness in my heart for the
Yeah.
Lord.
Yeah.
And so when I was in 6th grade, then Daddy packs up and leaves again. And we end up going to Ketchikan.
Oh, okay.
And there was one of the little girls that it was in 6th grade I went to school with, and she said, well, you want to go to Sunday school with me? And so as long as I had somewhere that was close enough where I could walk,
Yeah.
I went to Sunday school there for about 4 or 5 months, and then that pastor moved. So then I decided, okay, I got to find me another Sunday school. So I went to a little Baptist church up the street. And so by this time, we were there for just 1 year. And then he packs up and leaves again.
Oh, my goodness.
We end up in Skagway.
Oh, wow.
Well, when this young preacher was in Craig, he prayed for this crew and this little city of Craig for 10 years.
Oh, my goodness.
And probably longer than that, you know, but
Yeah.
lo and behold, when we end up in Skagway, here's this pastor and his wife.
Oh, my
And they
goodness.
were at that time, they were in the Assembly of God church.
Oh.
And it was there at that church that I learned about Jesus and his love. And I gave my heart to him.
Wow. And how old were you at that time?
I was 13.
13. Wow. But you kept growing and listening and
Yeah.
searching for that. So wow.
Yeah,
That's
and I
amazing.
think one thing too that helped me was I felt somebody cared about me.
Right.
And
yeah.
so it just made it where I wanted to go all the more. And
right.
so we end up there, and the next year, and during this time, the pastor's wife was so sweet. Her and I just prayed together a lot. I'd come to Sunday school just crying because I was so hurt that my mom and daddy wouldn't give their heart to the Lord, and my brothers and sisters that were home, and I wanted them so bad to come to church. Well, they didn't want nothing to do with the Lord. But a year later, we had a vacation Bible school, and the last night we had a speaker with Brother Butterfield, and he was loud, he was noisy, and the parents they didn't know what to do with that. They weren't used to something like that in a church.
Yeah.
And so my daddy, after the service, told Brother Phillips that, okay, I don't hold it against you for what kind of preachers you get in your church, but one day I'll come back and just show you.
Oh.
So it was about a year later. He comes home from work one Wednesday night and he said, I'm going to go to church.
Wow.
Well, my mom comes around and she said, what are you going to church for? Nobody starts on Wednesday night. You got to wait till Sunday. He said, nope, I'm going to church. And he was supposed to bartend that night at a big fancy hotel in Skagway. And they closed the bar because they had nobody to bartend. Well, he went to church. So anyway, he comes the next Sunday and he gives his heart to the Lord.
Wow.
And in the next short while, I got to see my whole family come to the Lord.
Oh, that's so
And
exciting.
almost all of them are still serving the Lord. Of course, my mom and daddy are both dead now.
Yeah.
But we gave our hearts to the Lord. And so I did 2.5 years of school up in Skagway. And then Daddy decided he wanted to go to a Bible school.
Oh, wow.
And so the pastor connected him with one down in Ballard, in Seattle there,
Oh, okay.
Philadelphia
Oh, okay.
Bible school. And so he went there for a year.
Oh, okay.
And
was the family with them, or did you guys stay?
It was just, by that time my oldest sister got married at 16.
Oh, okay.
My next sister got married at 17, so they were both gone.
Oh, okay.
We packed up in a little Volkswagen bus with all our belongings and headed for Seattle.
Wow.
With 3 of us kids, because I had 5 years after I was born, another child came along.
Oh, okay.
And so we had the 3 of us and my mom and daddy. And we went down to Bible school, and then we stayed down there for an extra year.
Oh, okay.
So now I do 2 more years of my school down there in
Okay.
a big high school.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Were
finally,
you able to find a church at?
we
when
went
you
to
were there?
Philadelphia Bible School.
Oh, okay. that
That's
they
a
had
big church
Okay.
there in
gotcha.
Ballard,
Okay.
because that's where Daddy, went to Bible school. So we
Yeah,
went to
yeah.
church over there.
Oh, okay.
But there was no Sunday school. We just went to church. So,
Oh, okay.
but it was still being in church, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I was growing in the Lord.
Oh, that's wonderful.
But so then in 1962, Dad decides it's time to go back to Alaska.
Oh.
So he bought him a little 40-foot troller boat, and my brother had graduated the year we got down there, and so he was gone. He had joined the Navy,
Oh.
and so now there's just my little sister and I.
Oh, okay.
But so we get on a boat and we head for Alaska and end up in Ketchikan. And Daddy wanted to go to Craig again to go and minister to the people that he had lived his sinful life with for those
okay.
6.5 years that we lived there.
Right, right.
Well, we found out there was no high school class up there, and I struggled in school, partly because of what I'd gone through in my life, and then I didn't learn to read till I was in 5th grade,
Oh, wow.
and that made it even worse yet.
Sure.
And so we get up to Ketchikan and find out there's no senior class. And I told the folks I'd never finish school if I had to try to do correspondence course.
Oh, okay.
So the pastor's wife, Lochthals, that were in the church up there, said I could stay with them. Well, then Mom and Daddy decided they couldn't go over to Craig. There was no doors opened over there.
Oh.
So they ended up staying in Ketchikan.
Oh.
And that was in October when we ended up in Ketchikan. And then, so we went to the assembly, got church there.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next month, on November 19th, our Wayne ended up coming to Ketchikan. He was 19. He had just given his heart to the Lord down there in Seattle.
Oh, okay.
They went to Calvary Temple, and him and this guy shows up at Ketchikan, and they were coming up to plasterboard the new hospital.
Oh, okay.
And so here, I'm not supposed to be in Ketchikan. I was headed for Craig. He was working as a drywall worker in Seattle, and these two brothers were going to go up and plasterboard a new hospital that was being made in Ketchikan. Well, one of the guys ended up with a heart attack and couldn't go. Well, he was the apprentice, and if they needed a third guy, they were going to bring him up. Well, this opened the doors for him to come. And so we met.
Wow.
And so on Tuesday, we were having a Thanksgiving Day dinner. And him and this other guy was sitting at the head table with the pastor and them. And our pastor's wife decides, I need to be the serve the table at that table. Now I'm 17, he's 19.
A little matchmaking there going on,
yeah.
sounds like.
Love at first sight.
Oh.
So then on Thursday we have our youth group, and the youth leader wants him to lead song service.
Oh, wow.
Well, he's a little bashful little guy. He didn't want nothing to do with that. Well, she finally convinced him to do it. And he had been sitting up front. Well, when he got done leading song service, the only place left was down on the pew where I was.
Oh.
By the end of the day, that evening, we end up sitting beside each other.
Oh.
And at Christmas time, I'll back up just a little bit.
Okay.
We were walking home from youth group one night, about 3 weeks later, and the way he proposed to me was, if it's God's will, one day I want you to be my wife.
Well, at least he was a man of God.
Right. So I said, okay. And he goes home on Christmas Eve to go back for a week down to Seattle. And his mama was not too happy with him.
Oh.
He comes to Alaska for a month and ends up with a little girl. Of course, her mind was a little Eskimo kid,
Oh, right.
But then his mama and the kids came up the next summer and they agreed I was pretty good.
Oh, okay.
So they approved it. So he decides after the hospital was done, he decides that he wants to stay up there.
Oh.
And he was from Canada originally.
Oh, okay.
And so he had gone in 1958 to Seattle.
Oh, okay.
And so anyway, we ended up at Christmas of '63. He decides to give me my engagement ring.
Aww.
And we were going to get married in June the next year.
Mm-hmm.
And we just felt the Lord tell us, no, you get married the first week in March.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And the day we got married, he got his induction papers to go get his physical.
Oh.
So luckily we didn't have a honeymoon plan because neither one of us had any money. And he goes up there and they said, oh, we don't want you. You're already married.
Oh.
so, and I had traveled so much, I did not want to travel in the service. So it really worked out nice.
Wow.
But we grew in the Lord. Our pastor was just what we needed. He was really Bible believing, teaching us how to grow in the Lord. And during this time, we had taken and I was having seizures quite bad by that time.
Oh, okay.
And I had never told anybody about being molested, being raped. I had no self-esteem. I had no confidence in myself. I was living in such guilt and shame that it was really hard. And I wanted to work for the Lord so bad. But everything I tried, I failed at. I couldn't teach Sunday school because I couldn't make it last long enough to fill the hour. I wanted to sing. I was told I couldn't carry a tune, so I couldn't sing. So finally, I thought, well, one thing I can do is work in a kitchen. I figured I could just go hide in there and wouldn't have to face people, and nobody could tell me that I wasn't doing a job.
Sure.
So I went and hid in the kitchen. Later on, I found out that being a servant is a gift of God. And it's one of the talents that He gave me.
Wow.
But we started a girls' club, which was called the Missionettes through the Assembly of God.
Oh, okay.
And of course, I didn't know how to teach. So they said, well, you want to be the coordinator. And so I figured, well, okay, I can at least read a book and learn how to keep the thing going.
Sure, yeah.
And so I did that and worked with the girls for up until '84 when we got ready to leave Alaska.
Oh, wow. Now, these were younger women, so you were kind of a mentor type situation.
Yeah,
right?
they were,
Yeah.
I worked with all the way from the little kindergartens clear up to the 11, 12-year-old girls.
Oh, okay.
And so they were the rainbows and prims and daisies and stars.
Oh, that's neat.
And so it was a real neat program for teaching the girls how to serve the Lord. And they had to memorize scriptures. So it really got their hearts into it like I had been.
Yeah.
But by the time I got married, I was really starting to have these seizures bad. And I had never opened up to anybody about that I even had these seizures.
Wow.
And when I was smaller, Mom and Dad would think I was just ignoring them, and they would punish me. Well, really, I was having seizures.
Right.
And so, anyway, after we got married and I started having kids, I started having them real bad. And finally, I told my folks about it. I opened up to a youth pastor and told her what had gone on in my young life, and that I didn't know what these things were. I just, like I say, I call them dizzy spells. And so she went to my folks and went to our pastor, and pastor told my mom and dad, well, all they wanted to do was just believe God. That I still didn't go to a
this
doctor.
was before you got married.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And I was about 17 at this time.
Okay.
And so we started having kids in 1965.
Oh, okay.
And we had 3 kids, 20 months apart, each one of them.
Wow.
So I had my hands full by the time I was 24. But after my youngest daughter was born, well, actually about 6 months before she was born, I woke up one day and this side of my face was numb.
Oh.
And the doctors thought, well, maybe it was the way I was carrying her.
Oh, right.
And so 6 weeks after I had her, I finally went down to a neurologist to see what was going on.
Right.
And that was when I finally told them about these spells that I was having and put me on medication. And they had me on Dilantin and phenobarbital. Well, I started having them worse than what I was having them before. Well, come to find out, I was allergic to the Dilantin.
Oh,
And
okay.
so then I went on the phenobarbital, and after a couple years, it didn't take long before my body become accustomed to it, and then I went into grand mal seizures,
Oh my goodness.
and that was real bad.
Mm.
But when our youngest daughter, like I say, Wayne and I was growing in the Lord, and just we'd gone through a number of different pastors.
Mm-hmm.
They'd stay about 5 years, 6
Yeah.
years, and then they'd change pastors, you know. So we had a
Yes.
big variety of different pastors,
Yeah.
but we grew in the Lord. And one thing that our pastor, when we got married, told us, you know, you never go to bed angry.
Mm.
And there's a neat scripture in Psalms 31
Oh,
that
okay.
gives you, tells you, you know, the Lord don't want you to go to bed angry.
Right, right.
You have joy in the morning.
Ah, okay.
And so we stood on that all our life. And we've been married 54 years,
Wow.
or 56 years now, and have never had a fight because we just have never let ourselves
Get to that
get
point.
to that point.
Yeah.
And
wow.
so God has just blessed us in a mighty way.
Mm, mm.
Um,
So you had gone and seen a neurologist
mhm.
and found out, I forgot, the brain waves or something
Yeah, my
like that?
brain waves were abnormal. That was
Oh,
the only
interesting.
thing that they could come up with.
Yeah, yeah.
And
And then they put you on some medicine, but then it started making you have some, what I forgot what you called it,
it was,
Mall seizures?
yeah, it was epileptic seizures
Oh,
was what
okay.
I had, was
Oh,
epilepsy.
okay.
And it's petit mal is where it's the mild form of epilepsy.
Oh,
And
okay.
then the grand mals is when it's the bad part of epilepsy
Oh,
where
okay.
it actually, you pass out from it.
Oh my goodness.
And,
wow.
Yeah, so that's the bad ones of epilepsy. That I had 3 real bad ones before they put me on a stronger medication.
Mm,
So anyway, during these years, I would have problems, you know, and stuff. But as our children grew, our youngest daughter, she was 12, and she started really giving us a bad time. She got in with the wrong crowd and started smoking pot
Oh
and
my goodness.
drinking. And Wayne and I, it was so hard. One day she decides to leave us. And we just couldn't figure out, God, you said if we raise our kids for you, that they'll obey you.
Mm, mm.
And so we said, how can this happen?
Yeah, yeah.
We've served you. We've had our kids in church. Because every time the doors was open, we were in church.
Yeah.
And we raised them to love the Lord. But she got in with the wrong crowd. And for 2 years, it was like a parenthesis was just put around our life. We just quit existing.
Oh.
Some of the church people turned against us because my husband was a deacon. And if you can't control your own family, then you can't be a deacon, you know.
Yeah.
So that was hard too.
Yeah, I bet.
And so anyway, she decided to try to pit us against each other.
Oh.
If Daddy says no, then go to Mama.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, she would come to me and I would tell her no because I was going to stand with Wayne.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, she would get me to the point where I could feel a seizure coming on, and I'd just say, go, get out of here, leave me alone, you know.
Yeah.
But I knew it was wrong
Mm, mm.
because I knew I had to stand with Wayne.
Yeah.
And so one night on May 23rd, we had an evangelist that came to Catch Camp.
Mm,
And he was praying for people. And I had every single pastor pray for me. Everybody that come through prayed for me. Still, I'd watch myself get worse. I'd try going off the medicine. I'd have seizures. I'd have to go back on it. And it was so discouraging.
Yeah,
And yet I tried to trust the Lord.
yeah.
Well, this one night, this pastor came, and as he laid hands on me, I was slain in the spirit. And I laid on the floor for about 45 minutes. It was just an open door between God and me.
Wow.
It was so beautiful.
That's powerful.
And I really felt a difference when I got up. I felt God had finally healed me.
Wow.
And so that night I didn't take my medicine.
Mm.
And the next morning I started having withdrawals because I was on 1,500 milligrams of Tegretol. And going cold turkey off something like that was not a smart idea. But I wanted to trust the Lord.
Sure.
And so I took, and by Sunday, I had the shakes so bad.
Oh.
And so we went to church Sunday morning, and Sunday night I'd gone to the altar and was praying, and went and sat. I got done praying, and I went and I was sitting on the front seat pew, worshiping the Lord, singing with the music that was going on. And that evangelist walked by, and he just said, "Oh, Lord bless her," you know. And he went his way and was gone for maybe 10 minutes, and pretty soon he come back, and he looked at me, and he said, "In the name of Jesus, you quit shaking. God heal her."
Wow.
And you know, I quit shaking.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, a
Wow.
miracle had taken place,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I just knew God had healed me.
Mm.
And so I just went off my medicine, and I had no side effects. I didn't have any seizures.
Wow.
And the next month, I got a letter from Harborview Hospital, the neurology department, and they decided they were going to do some follow-ups
Oh, okay.
on some of their patients.
Mm.
And they said, if you could find a way down here, we'll do all your tests for you
Wow.
and run them through to see how you're doing. And we had planned on going on vacation in August, so it made it really nice. Let's go there anyway, you know.
Yeah.
And when they did my tests,
Mm-hmm.
and I went in to meet with the doctor,
Mm-hmm.
and she just was shaking her head. She said, "There's nothing wrong with you.
Wow.
Your brain waves are normal."
Oh my goodness.
She said, "I can't tell you not to take your medicine, but I don't think you really need it." I said, "Well, that's okay. I haven't had them for 3 months."
Wow.
And so anyway, I
God
was,
is wonderful.
after 21 years, God completely healed me. But He knew the timing of God is always perfect.
I know.
He knows when
Mm-hmm.
we need something, and it was time. I needed it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then in '84, we decided to go to Bible school. Wayne wanted to go to Bible school.
Okay.
And our daughter, when she was having so much trouble, she wanted us to leave Ketchikan.
Oh.
She wanted to get away from these people because we'd sent her to a camp, and she had given her heart to the Lord.
Oh.
And so she said, "I need to get out of here."
Yeah.
Well, a family can't just up and pack and
Right.
leave because
Right.
some girl can't get her life straightened out. So the Lord shut the pulp mill down for 6 months and led us to Bible school.
Wow.
So we packed up and we came down, and Wayne went to Bible school for 4 years, and I had to start working too, and I had been a stay-home mom for 22 years.
Wow. Okay.
And so I had no education. I went through high school, but I didn't have any job skills, nothing.
Sure.
So I ended up getting on at Sears
Oh.
and worked there. And then I went to teller training school, and then a year later I got on a bank.
Oh. Okay.
And so I started working, and a family was coming in from China that had been in Ketchikan and was meeting out in Hoquiam. And so a whole bunch of us went out to see them. And her and I was standing in the doorway one night, and she said, "Laura, there is something different about you."
Wow.
She said, "I don't know what it is, but in '86, I had been at a the church in Bellevue. We had gone to neighborhood church when we were going to Bible school.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a lady that came to minister that her ministry was a potter's wheel.
Oh, okay.
And she was telling and giving a demonstration on a potter's wheel with the mortar. And she had been raped as a child, and how she was telling of that, you know, God forms these beautiful little vessels. And sometimes they get broken. Sometimes they get marred. But God will break that clay back down again and remold that vessel. And afterwards, she was praying for people. And she looked at the congregation, and there was probably 1,500 people in that church.
Wow.
And she looked at me, and she said, "Come here." She said, "God wants to do something in your life."
Oh, my goodness.
And so she had me up there, and she said, "You know, I can tell you have had a rough life." And she said, "I want to pray with you to forgive those people that abused you. And more importantly," she said, "I want you to learn how to forgive yourself." She said, "I know you're living in guilt and shame, and I want you to forgive yourself. And then God can start working in you. This is how He's going to remold this vessel." And she said, "I want you to look in that mirror every day and say, 'Laura, I forgive you.'" And after about the third day of that, I felt something happen in my life. And so when I met this lady, I didn't think nothing too much about what she was saying. But I thought, oh, okay, I'm working. I'm independent. If something happened to Wayne, you know, I could take care of myself. So I didn't think anything more about it.
Sure.
Well, in '91, we had our first granddaughter in Ketchikan. And so I wanted to go see my grandbaby. And she was already 7 months at Christmas. And so I told Wayne, I said, "I want to go back to Ketchikan. I want to go see my baby." And so he said, "I don't want to go." Well, I don't care. I'll go. So I went ahead and I made our tickets. And I made them for 2 weeks. He said, "Why for 2 weeks?" I said, "Because I haven't seen my kids." And he said, "All right." So we go up there. And Jeffrey's working out at the pulp mill where Wayne had worked for so many years now. And so he took Wayne out one night to see all of his people he had worked with. "Are you coming back? Are you coming back?" You know? And he said, "Well, not really." He said, "I don't have no desire." Well, that night the wheels started turning. And so we decided maybe that'd be a good idea. Because we were struggling down here. We had nothing. And Wayne was driving school bus, and I was working at a bank at this time, but we just couldn't get ahead. And so we said, you know, let's go back to Ketchikan. So he calls his boss up the next day. "You really want to come back?" He said, "Yeah, I think I do." So we went home the first of the year after we left, and we started packing. And March 6th, we hit the road back for Alaska. And as we were getting ready to leave the church, they had a party for us. And so some of them was talking to us and telling stories about how we'd been there. And we had started a ministry called 48 Hours. It was a visitation program that Wayne and I had started. And we visited every visitor that came into the neighborhood church. And we had this ministry for 2 or 3 years. So anyway, when this one family, they said, "You know, Laura, the thing we're going to miss about you is coming into the foyer in that church and seeing your smiling face."
Wow.
And, you know, I thought, okay. And still, it never dawned on me of when I got my smile and the happiness that I had. And so we went back to Alaska, got ready to go, and my youngest daughter, Karen, she's, "Mom and Daddy," she says, "You know, it's okay if you go back up there." She said the mission was accomplished, and that was to salvage me
Oh.
And it was just so neat, you know, to see her become a young adult and love the Lord.
Yeah.
And so we said, you know, okay, so anyway, we ended up back in Alaska. And it was neat because one of the young gals that I had worked with in our missionette program
Oh, yeah.
was now the leader of the
Oh.
missionette program.
Oh.
And so it was just like the fruit was coming into my little basket.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
to see that my work had not all been for
Right.
vain, you know.
Right. Right.
And
we don't always get to see that, but God has shown
no,
that
he
to
did.
you.
He brought
Yeah.
me able to be back up there.
Yeah.
And during the 7 years that we were down here, I never felt like I was home.
Ah.
I always wanted to go back
Ah. Okay.
to Alaska, where when he come out, he could care less.
Yeah.
But when we were on that plane going into Ketchikan at Christmas, it was like God had brought us home.
Oh.
And so it was really neat. So anyway, we come back, and I started working with the little 9 to 12-year-old girls and teaching them
Oh, wow.
and taking them through these programs.
Wow.
And
So what a difference from when you first started feeling like you couldn't teach, or
yeah,
and then here you are, how God has brought you along
yeah,
and prepared you
he did.
to
He
do
really
that.
did.
Yeah.
And so we go back up, and we were there for 10 years.
Wow.
And growing in the Lord and working in the church. And Wayne, the little Assembly of God church that we grew up in the Lord and was married in, they decided it was time to build a bigger church.
Oh, okay.
And so the mill went down in 98. And so he worked just part-time, and I worked
okay.
full-time at a petromarine oil company.
Oh, okay.
And because when the pulp mill went down, as long as he didn't have a full-time job, they would pay his insurance clear up till he's 65.
Wow.
So we said, okay, you can work at a little place, I'll work at full-time.
Yeah.
And so that's what we did. And it worked out beautiful because they decided to build a new church. He's working just part-time, so he could do most of the work
wow.
at the church.
Yeah.
And every Saturday we had work crews. And so I would organize meals for all the workers and all these people. And so there again, my servanthood that God had given me my gift
in the kitchen.
in the kitchen.
There you are.
And so we were up there till 2002 and decided to come back down. And so we moved down, and God showed us to go to this little community church in Hoodsport.
Oh, yeah.
And we couldn't figure out why. We'd been raised in assembly.
Oh, yeah.
And we thought, well, okay, Lord, you know. And so we moved down in March and moved up to Hoodsport and got our home and everything up there, and was going to this little church. God opened the doors for Wayne to teach Sunday school.
Wow.
And everything. And so just in April the next year, we had gone out to Gardner to see evangelists that had been in Alaska
Oh, okay.
many times in our home.
Sure.
And we wanted to go see him.
Yeah.
And he introduced us as he did. He said, you know, these are my friends from Alaska that came down, and they're on a temporary assignment in this community church. And we thought, oh, okay. Lo and behold, the next month, the doors were shut. And we left the church.
Oh!
And so in June we saw him. We said, did you know you were prophesying over us when you said that? And he said, yeah. And so then we started going to church in Evergreen, the big church in Assembly of God Church in Evergreen, in Olympia.
Oh, okay.
So we went in there and grew in the Lord during this time too.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we just, for about a year and a half, we were just unsettled. We knew a change was coming in our lives. And we didn't know whether we were going to be selling out, going somewhere. We just didn't know. But we knew God was just stirring our hearts.
Oh, okay.
And so one night we we went into the Assembly of God Church, Bethel Assembly, here in Shelton,
Yeah.
and met the pastor and stuff that was there. And so we thought, okay. Well, he had left that church and went into the Church of God. They had voted him out, and he went over, and God miraculously opened the doors for this church that was empty.
Wow.
And he went over there, and we walked in one night. We decided, let's just go over there and see what it's like, because that pastor just touched our hearts. And so we walked in there, and we knew that was where God had his calling for us during this last time. And so we've been there for about 10 years now.
Oh my goodness.
And
wow.
I got involved in the girls club again.
Oh, good.
And worked
good.
up until a year ago, last April. I finally retired from the girls club. But we are so active in the church, and pastor is Keith is just someone special.
Neat.
And during this time, we got involved in the food bank.
Oh yeah.
And started working at the food bank. And about a year and a half ago, I started being the sidekick for Kathy Thompson.
Oh, okay.
Robertson, that was the leader of the food bank.
Sure.
And her mother-in-law used to travel with her all the time, and she worked 7 days a week almost, picking up food and going and meeting the different stores and getting acquainted and getting new ways to get food. And so the Lord put me with her.
Yeah.
And so I got to start going with her, learning how to buy food,
Yeah.
who to go to. We got hooked up with Fred Meyer's and Safeway, and so we get our food from them and different places.
Yeah.
And then in July, she started getting real sick
Oh, okay.
and didn't have time to train anybody.
Oh.
So, and people had said, well, if anything happens to Kathy, you can take over. Well, God had a different plan.
He always does, doesn't he?
He does.
Surprise.
He has a different plan for us. So he, when she got so sick, she didn't have time to train anybody or anything. And so people said, well, okay, you're going to do it.
Yeah.
Okay. So at 76 years old, I became the executive director of the Hood Canal Food Bank. And it was a real struggle because I had no idea what to do.
Sure.
God just started working and showing me. And the week before Kathy died, my daughter and I, every morning, we called each other. And I prayed with her, and she prayed with me. And this one night, she says, Mama, I couldn't sleep. She called, when we called the next morning, she said, I couldn't sleep last night. And she said, I felt God talk to me, something I've never felt like before.
Yeah.
And he said, you tell Mama that I don't want her to depend on the Lord, on Kathy, but if she'll depend on me, I'm going to help her through.
Wow. Wow.
And it was so neat. And so I've just been able to just say, okay, Lord, I don't know what to do, but you help me,
Yeah. Yeah.
And Dottie, which was the vice president of our food bank, she was sort of a hard person to get along with and to get acquainted with.
Sure. Yeah.
And when I told her what God had told Tina, it just bonded us because she's a neat Christian. And it just bonded us together.
Wow.
And she has been such a blessing and a help to me and helping, her and I to get through this together.
Sure.
And so I am working with 2 Christians. Our president is a Christian.
Oh.
And so we have 3 of us main leaders as Christian people. And we depend on the Lord.
That's amazing.
And this church has been a blessing to us because they have food drives for us every 3 months.
Yeah.
And this is how I met Brenda
Oh, yeah,
and
okay.
Michelle as we came out to pick up food.
Oh, right.
And we've come out to the Thanksgiving dinners
Oh, okay.
a couple times.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
That's
God's
great.
really blessed us.
Oh, that's wonderful. And it's so amazing to see how He has molded you, as you had spoken before, so that you were ready to take on, but still relying on Him too, giving you that strength and yes, Lord, I can rely on you, and I know that you can get me through this.
Yeah.
So that's
And
wonderful.
Back to married life, it's like a triangle. God on the top and the man and woman on the bottom. And it don't work if just one of you are getting close to the Lord. Right. That triangle is broken. So you both have to grow together. And so beautiful. Wayne and I have centered our life completely on God.
Yeah.
And God has helped us through so many times.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one scripture I'd like to read
please.
that has been something that sort of will climax of how God has woven my life. Yeah. And it's Psalms 139, 13 to 16. And this is in the New Living Bible.
Okay.
You made all the delicate inner parts of my body and knit me together in my mama's womb.
Yeah.
Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous. How well I know it. You watched me as I was being formed in seclusion, as I was woven together in the dark of the womb. You saw me before I was ever born.
Right.
Every day of my life was recorded in your book. So He's wrote a book about us, every one of us. Yeah. Every moment was laid out before a single day had passed.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And our strength comes from the Lord.
Yeah. Yeah. If we let it. And that's so important.
That's the secret.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we just have to depend on Him, and He knows every day. Sometimes we go through struggles. We don't understand it. But God does.
Yeah. Yeah, He does. He does. Well, thank you so much
You're
for sharing.
welcome.
And then tell us a little bit about how the food bank is doing. Do you have any special needs right now, or?
Our numbers are down quite a bit right now.
Oh, okay.
Because of all the stimulus checks and stuff that are coming in.
Okay.
And most of our people in the food bank are older.
Oh, okay.
And we reach people all the way from Brockdale all the way to Lilywop.
Oh, wow.
And so we have a big span of people that come in. But we're doing pretty good financial wise, and food wise we're doing
good.
real good right now because of our numbers being down.
Oh, okay.
And we do get some government money.
Okay.
And that helps us too, because when we go out and buy food, like yesterday, I went out and bought a bunch of food. Well, then I can turn that slip in, and the government reimburses us. So that was has been a big help for us right now. Great. But we get quite a bit of vegetables and stuff through a program, Food Lifeline.
Oh, okay.
They have since COVID, they have supplied us with a lot of vegetables and dairy products and stuff.
Oh, nice.
So that's been a big help, where before we have to go out and buy that stuff.
Oh, okay.
And so
great.
Yeah, God's just blessed our little food bank since we've taken over it. We miss Kathy, but
yeah, she was there a long time.
Yeah.
So we will just continue to gather stuff and get it over to you as we get it. Then.
Yeah, that works good, because we have a lot of the things like you guys bring in is our odds and ends, and so we have boxes that we put those kind of things out in, where
perfect.
It's a bigger variety, where we can go out and buy the main soups and stuff like this,
sure.
where these odds and ends are the nice things to bring in that we don't have to go out and buy.
Right.
So
right.
it's a big
Good
help to
variety.
us. Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a beautiful story. I hope that you were touched as much as I was, and perhaps you learned something that God was trying to teach you through this story that Laura had shared with us. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next month.
The journey begins at the narrow gate. The journey, Jesus beckons me to roam. The journey, where the path is straight. The journey takes me home.